Once we start this live stream, please make sure we have masks. If you're in the room with us.
You had to open your eyes. So like, she's going for the eye look too. Oh, there you go.
A thought has crossed my mind. Incognito.
All right, so we are live, 7 o'clock. We'll get started. Maybe Mr. Craybill and Mr. Flickinger will join us here via Zoom. If they do, we'll let them in. So we'll just go through the agenda and then we'll talk, we'll finish up the evening, then going into executive session to talk personnel. First, finance, we'll pay any bills that need to be paid. And then we will also do a, and we'll recommend that PDE 287 monthly reimbursement voucher for school lunches and milk program be accepted as a financial report on the operation and filed for audit. I will let you know one thing with our lunch program right now. All of our students, regardless of their socioeconomic status, are receiving free lunches, K through 12. And that is the federal government has extended the free lunch until December 31st. We're hearing word that they're actually going to extend it for the remainder of the year also. So we're going to see what happens. But as of right now, we will I believe that's Mr. Flickinger or Mr. Craybill. Hopefully they'll identify themselves once they're in. But we will follow that. As long as that's done, we'll continue to do that for our students. So that gives every student a free lunch. And any student at the high school then, if they wanted something extra like a bottle of water or another snack or anything else, that is what come out of their
Right.
Is that at some point going to be listed on here? How, I mean,
Yes.
federal government's paying for it, but you know, it doesn't fall under this.
It doesn't, it's not, I think what we'll do is we'll add it as a ways and means.
Okay.
I'm gonna check with Brooke where to put that, our attorney. And once Brooke tells us where we can put that, but most likely that would be a ways and means as just something to keep following the federal lunch program.
Right. I just want it noted somewhere so that people realize we are doing it
Yes.
and following protocol.
So. All right. Who is 717-521-8261?
8261, the main.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Flickinger.
Sorry, I was watching the president. Sorry.
Sorry, carry on.
All right. There we go. We got that renamed. All right. Moving on to ways and means. First, if you guys recall in June, we talked about the Keystone exams the kids missed and that we did not want them making them up. Well, while we did do an official board vote on it, we did do one of those. What we're going to do now is they're recommending that we do a resolution called 113. And it's the resolution in response to the COVID-19 pandemic Keystone exams. Basically stating what we did in June, we make it official with a resolution, we sign it, which will be done next week with you and Mrs. Duncan, Mr. Groff, and then it'll be submitted to the state.
Okay. And it did explain how it's going to affect people down the road, right?
Yes. Yep. And we have a plan in place where we will we'll look at grades, course completion, and a final exam as a possibility for those students to still be able to graduate with everything the state requires.
Okay.
Also, we're going to recommend authorizing Dr. Corbin to attend Advocating for Gifted Learners in a Time of COVID, sponsored by the Lincoln Intermediate Unit on November 10th from 9 to 11, 1 to 3 p.m., and 1.5 hours in a Schoology course. It will be held virtually with all costs to be paid and reimbursed by the district and an amount not to exceed $125. And that's part of Dr. Corbin and actually Dr. Perry's, I guess, co-goal for this year is to analyze and update our gifted plan for our learners. And it's something that's needed to be done for a couple of years now. And so the goal is to have by the end of the year, the gifted plan to move forward for next year for our students that will benefit all our students that are identified K through 12 as gifted education. In addition, we'll also look at the gifted education process to be identified and make sure that we're following that according to what the state wants. Property and supplies, we do not have any. And what I'll do before we go into personnel, I'm actually going to ask Dr. Perry to present her assistant superintendent report first. So I'll let you go, Dr. Perry.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So
Good evening.
for this evening, I have 3 items to discuss that are on the agenda, but then I also wanted to provide a 4th update this evening. So my first update is around curriculum needs assessment. So when I interviewed about this time last year, it was actually towards the end of October. It's come that quickly. The number 1 response from the board, the priority for me, was to identify needs around our curriculum, K through 12. So the department leaders, the principals, myself, other district office personnel have started that process. And that process will take us through at least the midpoint of this academic year. And then based upon that data, our goal is to put together an action plan for your consideration moving forward. So this is a topic that you will hear me bring up throughout the year and updates as such for implementation for next school year. So I've already begun to collect data from our curriculum leaders and from some of our principals to date. So I'm compiling that data and I'm really excited to work with everybody to come up with a curriculum process that makes sense and offers a viable living curriculum for our students K-12. The second item is around the Title IX. And as you know, at our last board meeting, you've identified myself as well as Mr. Lovejoy as the compliance officer and Title IX coordinators. We also updated an agreement with HAC that was approved September 21st. There will be forthcoming a Harrisburg University agreement that too is updated with Title IX language that will be coming for your review as soon as we receive it back from Stockton later. The third item is an update regarding the Konawaga Valley Online Academy. We are planning to put together a committee to consider expansion options for the 2021-2022 school year. At this time, we have 200 students who are participating in the Konawaga Valley Online Academy, and much feedback has been provided about the expansion of this program into next school year. So we do need to take a look at that to figure out a way how we can do that in a fiscally responsible way. As part of the Konawaga Valley Online Academy, there are 3 courses that I will be bringing forward for your approval at our next board meeting. The first of which is Art for iPads, Family and Consumer Science Seminar, and the History of Rock and Roll. So it was necessary for the high school to have online elective options due to our graduation requirements. So in collaboration with the faculty and the administration, here are 3 new courses that we felt were viable options for our online academy. The last item that I have for you this evening is around career and technical education. You may or may not be aware that there's some conversation between Mrs. Zeta Flores from Miller Chemical and Krista Hayward from the Conewago Valley Education Association, where there's potential for a grant for a greenhouse to be constructed on the property of Conewago Valley School District near the high school. There is also an environmental education grant that was brought to our attention that we believe has the potential to join those two forces together, since there's a 20% match requirement as part of the environmental education grant writing process. So we are looking into that. Mr. Little, Dr. Bowman, and myself, as well as curriculum leaders, are having some conversations about the viability of that option. We would look to apply to that grant no later than December 1st. Also, alongside that, it would make very much good sense then to look to apply for an agricultural science program for the 2021-2022 school year through Career and Technical Education to be a PDE approved program of study. Naturally, upon review of Mr. Little and myself, we believe that the most viable option would be a horticulture program with the use of that potential greenhouse. We're also looking and considering precision production and communications technology as additional career and technical education programs that we would move forward for approval for the 21-22 school year. That, Dr. Russo, that's all I have.
And so with the
Hey, Dr. Perry, real quick, this is Eric.
Yes,
Sorry.
I am.
There's a previous graduate that I graduated with, Mark Dellinger is his name. He's big into not big, but he's horticultural stuff. And I think he's into building greenhouses. I just ran into his wife the other day. He was out of the area for years. Now he's back in the area. So if you would ever want advice, he might give you advice or help with as a previous graduate of New Oxford. So when it gets to that point, just if you're interested, let me know. I can get you his contact information.
Yes, thank you. We'd be definitely interested, because if we are pursuing a career and technical education program, it would be important that we develop an occupational advisory committee. And he would be a great addition to that team. So I appreciate that contact.
Welcome.
The gentleman that used to run our FFA or whatever, I don't think it's even called FFA anymore. Why isn't he involved in this horticulture, this agriculture part of it? I'm hearing Mr. Little all the time, and I'm not hearing. Yeah. What is his name? I
Mr. Jones.
Can't think of it right now.
Richard Jones was our FFA.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, so with the
Yes.
expansion of the welding program, Mr. Jones will be focusing on the development and the overall implementation of our welding PDE approved program of study. Skills USA is the career and technical student organization that is required for that program. So, so Mr. Jones will be heading that up with our welding program, as well as with Skills USA. So moving forward, we do believe that we can fill a potential role through retirement with an agricultural science teacher, thus being able to focus exclusively on the agricultural science and FFA, being the career and technical student organization that would match up to that program of study. So that is particularly a goal for us.
You say through retirement?
Well, we could talk about that in personnel during the executive session.
Okay, that's fine. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I know at one time we had FFA we had a lot of kids, but then it kind of dwindled down. Do we think we have a need for it? Can we build it back up to a point?
I think a lot of that's going, and we can talk about it in the personnel, but we get the right, if we can hire an ag science teacher
Okay,
whose focus is that will develop that program, and with the potential addition of a greenhouse. What happened with our FFA is our FFA focused a lot on the welding and engines, small gas engines, which is a wonderful part to do with FFA, but we did nothing with FFA in regards to crops, flowers, agriculture, any of that. Like, we missed a big portion of what we were supposed to be doing with FFA.
okay.
We sure did.
We just didn't have the resources here for it. And with the potential of this, greenhouse and anything else that we could get from this, we could definitely rebuild that to a point where it's a state approved program, our kids, are invested. We have officers, we have meetings, we go through the whole deal.
And I think it, like he said, as far as popularity goes, if you're looking at the eco-friendly side and the health sciences side of things, the nutrition and stuff you can get from the greenhouse, I think that would really build even more interest in that side of the program.
Well, and again, I think it's just an area that.
I think,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Hoffman.
no, that's fine. You were talking. Go ahead.
No, you got it. Go ahead. I talk all the time.
I'm just thinking, you see so many people doing things that haven't done for years since they're in, kind of in captivity, but, you couldn't buy a ball jar any place unless, a month ago. There's tons of that kind of stuff going on. And I hear people talking all the time about getting back to nature and growing their own stuff. And I think the kids would really benefit if we had a decent FFA project or curriculum.
Yeah, that's my point. Make sure we have, enough, a group to make it worthwhile. If we're going to go after grants and things like that, and, talking to the right people, we know Miller Chemical is, as big as it gets in the area. So that would be great if we can hook up with them and provide it, open up a whole
I'm sure AgCom would be a big supporter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things, it sounds cheesy, but if we build it, they'll come.
Yeah, I think we can build
they will.
Excitement as we build the building.
Yes.
Sure. Just get the right instructor.
Yeah,
Yes.
you got it. That's the key.
Well, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but been down the build it and they will come. You want to make sure that that's aligned with the agricultural industry in the community, which it is. Agricultural is big in Adams County. It's big in the state of Pennsylvania, but you've got to have that, as Dr. Perry said, that advisory group that is going to help narrow down. You can't take a shotgun approach and hope that you're going to have bits and pieces and people are going to come. You want to have the targeted approach.
Correct.
Well, somebody mentioned AgCom and again, they're another big company in the area. And they all of their kids went to school here, so I'm sure they would provide, some type of interest in.
Well, and you had mentioned Aida at Miller Chemical. Her kids go here. She graduated here. Krista graduated here. So it's, yeah.
When Mr. Little and I just expand on the why we landed on the horticulture is you're absolutely right that, any career and technical education program has to be driven by it being a high priority occupation. Not because it's cool or it's something we want to offer, but it has to fulfill a need, to provide jobs for students as they would leave us. And when we looked at an Ag General program, which is sort of a survey program of natural resources, animal resources, ag mechanics, and ag production, it's not laser sharp focused. It's just a survey course of agriculture, the impact of agriculture. Horticulture, however, has a much closer relationship to the companies that we have in our area related to pesticides, chemical treatments, very, very interesting topics for students nowadays, genetically modified organisms and the science behind that, studying of organic plant growing versus those that are treated with pesticides. So there's a lot of rich research and data that can be achieved, through that industry interest. So based upon our minimal research that we did, based upon the programs, we felt that horticulture program is most in line with what our community actually needs at this time. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean we can't introduce ag mechanics and the welding. We have those materials right here with us, and the students should be exposed to that, but that does not necessarily mean it needs to be the focal point, of that program. So we would envision that being a horticulture program with an introduction to agricultural science and all of those different pathways an introductory ag survey course. But then another aspect is the supervised ag experience, where the students actually had projects within our community. So we would want that program to be such that those students could go into our community, into our regional employers, such as Miller Chemical or AgCom, where they would have a rich experience there through their supervised ag experience. And they call that SAE for short, which is a requirement for FFA. So all of these things will come in alignment, and then you throw a greenhouse into the mix, and that's our lab. You know, that's the laboratory for these students, and that's really, really exciting that we could potentially provide that opportunity to grow this. This is a farm school. We want to maintain the history and the tradition of the school. It's an identifier of our community. So, you know, I think that anything we can do to respect that, I think it's a good direction for us to take.
I think Bill's right, getting the right, you know, head, the right department heads and that kind of stuff is important. I know back in my day, he went day to day, love and hate, but not one single person left here without respecting him and learning something.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
from their experience. And so many of them I still see go back and, you know, are still acquaintances or friends with him today. So just, yeah, there's a lot to learn there.
Yeah, a lot of potential.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else for Dr. Perry? This evening, I'm just going to talk briefly to you about athletic plan. I'm going to share survey results on a potential face-to-face return for our students and when that may or may not happen. And then just a quick COVID-19 update with the district to let you know where we are with everything. So first and foremost, I'll talk athletics. If you recall, I believe it was last Friday. I sent an updated athletic plan
Okay.
that allowed 4 tickets for seniors, 2 tickets for underclassmen, and then we also were allowing volleyball matches to be watched. As of last Thursday, or maybe I guess it was 2 weeks ago. So last Thursday, the governor's appeal was upheld, and the 250-25 went back into effect for outdoor and indoor gatherings. As of right now, we have not touched our plan. We will wait and see. The governor's supposed to come out tomorrow or Wednesday with an updated 250-25 as it applies to schools and athletics. And that will then guide what we do moving forward. We do not want to keep sending out an updated plan every other week to our community. So as of right now, this week, we have a home volleyball game Thursday. So we will have an answer for those volleyball parents by Wednesday afternoon if they are going to be in the game or watching the game via live stream based on the governor's recommendations. As far as field hockey and soccer go, that should not be affected too much because obviously we're under the 250 to begin with. And really the only other event that we have is in 2 weeks, and it's our last home football game, Friday, October 23rd. So we'll definitely know what we're doing by then, based on what the governor's doing. But everything else should be good. Our tennis team, their season's over, regular season's over, and they go into county championships this Thursday and Friday. I believe field hockey is probably getting close to the end also because they'll be getting ready for county championships and districts. And our soccer team will be playing multiple games here coming up, getting ready for their postseason play, hopefully. And then girls volleyball, I believe, has 5 more matches total that they had to get through. But at 2 a week, they'll be done in another week and a half, 2 weeks also. So a very successful season so far. We have cross-country championships this Saturday at Gettysburg, where our teams will be, some of our runners will be competing also. So to give you that update. The COVID-19 update, what I really wanted to share with the board and anyone that's listening, we have had a total in the district whether it be confirmed or probable cases of 4. That's it. We've had 1 staff member and we've had 3 students. And out of those 3 students, only 1 was confirmed. The other 2 were probable. So kudos to Dr. Sipe and as our pandemic coordinator, communicating, letting me know what's going on so that I can inform the community what's going on. When our letters are general, they need to be general because of protecting the identity of our students between HIPAA and FERPA and all those other terms. But it's important that we keep those anonymous because no one wants to be called out in public. And I know there's a need at times because parents worry, but I cannot stress this enough to our parents. Unless you receive a personal phone call from either myself, Dr. Sipe, a nurse, or a building principal, there is no need to worry about your child. Easier said than done. I've been on the end of that also with my children that go to a different district. But that is the case. And we have made those phone calls. And some of them are not always the easiest phone calls to make because it's not necessarily a child that actually has it, but might have been exposed through, as we go back through the contact tracing piece of it. But that is it to date. And I know working with the Department of Health, they have said over and over again how impressed they are with our health and safety plan and feel it's one of the better ones in the county. It's very thorough and it covers quite a bit. So I thank you, the board, for being patient. As we did that, we weren't the first ones to submit, but we wanted to make sure that we did it right. So that brings us to my next thing, and that's the teacher survey results. So last week, I reached out to our teachers, grades 4 through 12, to ask how they felt on a potential return to a full day-to-day instruction with students. And what I like to do is just share the page, and I shared this page with everyone today. So whether you had a chance or not to look at it, we'll do that now. But the survey question was, would you be in favor of bringing all our students back to school for everyday instruction? 343 participants. So that also included some aides and paraprofessionals and also IU employees to fill in with that 343. You can see from the results, 70.8% said yes, 29.2% said no. So then I was like, okay, that wasn't an overwhelming response as far as let's go at it. So then I broke it down by school because I wanted to see what the difference was in the schools. And CVIS was all but 90% want those kids back every day. There was 10.4% of the staff that responded no. Out of that 10.4, that was approximately 8 staff members. 4 of those staff members were teachers. The other 4 were aides that said that replied no. So, but 90% said yes. The middle school, 62% responded no. They would not feel comfortable bringing kids back, while 38% responded yes. And the high school, with 101 total responses, 40% responded no, 60% responded yes. So based upon that, those results, well, actually, before we get into that, we talked about dates to return. And obviously the most popular date that stuck out to most people was January 19th, which would be the start of a new semester. Finish out the semester, finish out the year, and then bring students back, possibly, they thought, if anything. And of course, almost 20% said no. The rest of these are just very little. People said as soon as possible. Some people said November 1st, and some people said October 5th. And I was like, okay, I get the, it just depended on the individual and what they wrote down.
Do you know why the middle school was more against it than the other?
I
Was there
don't.
a particular reason identified?
I did not, no. A lot of them did not feel it was the time to bring students back, especially with the beginning of a potential flu season just about to begin. They'd rather wait and see about a January or even a March return after the flu season goes through. to finish out the last trimester or marking period, as the case may be. The high school was very similar in their responses also. A lot of teachers are just worried about bringing kids in during the height of a potential, obviously, I mean, we're living in a pandemic, and then on top of that, you add that flu season on there, which they say they are predicting right now to be an active flu season, is what they're saying, I
Yeah,
guess.
I heard it was gonna be lower because of the mask this year.
Well, it might not
Who knows
be,
what's gonna happen.
yes.
Yeah.
So that was the response. So based upon those, obviously, I talked about next steps, and that was to review the data with the school board. Tomorrow, I'm going to review that data with the administration team and share that with the teachers union also.
Somebody online.
Yep. Yes. Okay.
Someone wishing to speak?
That might have been me hollering at the dogs.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
No, that's okay. We just want to make sure we answer any and all questions.
They were attacking a intruder.
It doesn't appear that all of the teachers answered. Or some-
No, pretty much 300, we have about 250 teachers in our district. So we have about 500 total staff.
Oh, okay.
So
All right. So,
out of those 343, the majority of teachers answered, and then one or two did not, and they reached out to me personally with an email, and I included that in the results also.
all right.
Yes. So while the data showed a positive result for face-to-face for 4 through 6, 7 and 12, and really 7 through 12 was only about 52% total staff felt the need to come back, and 48% were not quite ready to do that. So looking at, factors that we need to consider when we talk about a potential return to full instruction. While teachers may want this, and I have a survey that I've developed that I plan to share tomorrow with our parents also to get their feedback with everything. What they need to realize is that means we need to modify our health and safety plan if we do something like this. And that reality is we will not be able to maintain the 6 feet of distance that we have right now in every classroom. So obviously you increase the class sizes again, you have to put more desks in there, and we simply cannot keep that 6 feet. So the challenge that I set to some of our administrators is design 1 or 2 classrooms where rooms are 3 feet apart, where desks are 3 feet apart, to see what that looks like and how many you can fit in there safely. So they're doing that for me right now. The other piece is the mask break. Right now, a lot of times our students are having whole class mask breaks where they take the mask off. They're allowed to, 10 minutes of a mask break with the whole class doing it. It's because we're distanced 6 feet apart. We go to 3 feet, that whole class mask break goes away. It becomes almost a staggered mask break where maybe it's every 3rd child in a row gets a mask break for 10 minutes, and then you switch and it's, you go down the line. It's going to look very different because you have to maintain that safety. The other piece of it is our staff are really truly going to have to wear masks almost entirely all day, with their breaks most likely coming at prep time, in between classes, whatever the case may be, or they join a staggered group while they're teaching to take a mask break. That definitely changes everything because now you have more kids in a consolidated space. We got to look at, right now we're not using lockers. So now all of a sudden you're going to have lockers to middle school, to CVIS. I don't believe the high school kids use lockers to begin with half the time, but I know the middle school and CVIS use them quite often. And right now they're not, which is now adds another cleaning component that needs to happen on a day-to-day basis. In addition to that, lunches. Right now, we were able to fit students in through waves of lunches safely and still keep them socially distant. You add now 900 students to a lunch or 300 students to a lunch at an elementary school for CVIS, lunch has to take on a different role, which then may mean lunch in the classroom. If there's lunch in the classroom, that means there needs to be a memorandum of understanding that needs to be done between ourselves and the union because that half-hour duty-free lunch would disappear. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that. Also, the transition between classes. Right now, teachers transition between rooms. Chances are we go full on, they probably want the students to transition because the teacher's going to be in the room to have all their materials and technology. So that transition piece is going to be a big part to look at. How we choose to transition kids. Can we keep them socially distant or at least 3 feet apart to transition in between classes? Which at the high school level, I don't know how that happens. You know, because reality is they're adults, they're young adults. And while we can get away with it at the elementary school because they walk the right side of the hallway, you have hands to yourself, they have songs for it. I don't believe the teacher singing a song to the high school students would go very well. And at some point, they'd make up their own words for it. So
That's potential.
yes. The other piece that's a big thing to think about is buses. Right now, we're very fortunate. 2 per seat, and it's not every seat. We have gaps and we have, you know, seats that are empty, which is fabulous. It helps us out a lot, especially if a kid's on that bus and they end up becoming a probable case. We can go back, we can look at the video, we can look at the seating chart so we can see where every kid was. It helps with contact tracing. Now you're looking at the potential of every seat being filled with at least 2 per, if not more, depending on, you know, the bus and the routes they take. So those are all things that we have to look at and take into consideration if we consider truly bringing back a grade, a class, a school, whatever the case may be. It is very important that we look at all that. And so right now, based on a lot of that stuff, my recommendation is to hold off on grades 7 through 12 to at least January and revisit in January then. I don't want to rush that process just to get people back. The other piece is if it's not done safely, the Department of Health can come in and say we're shut down anyway, and then we're doing what we don't want to do, and that's completely going remote learning. Part of what drove this survey and what drove this is I'm hearing from teachers loud and clear. I'm hearing from parents loud and clear. Students are struggling with a hybrid learning model. It's tough to be a day in, it's tough to be a day out. Part of it though is, you know, those students, especially our younger students, 4 through 6, it's tough to be self-disciplined, say, I'm gonna get my work done, submitted on time without any help at times. It's a difficult process. It doesn't matter how many videos we upload and how to teach a lesson, it never replaces that face-to-face interaction that we can have. Our 7 through 12, we're finding some of our students just aren't choosing to do the work. They don't think it counts. And then they're surprised when they're not eligible for sports. Because, well, what do you mean I'm failing? Well, you're not turning your work in. Or if we have parents calling saying, why is my kid marked absent? And I might be getting a truancy letter or a potential fine. Well, if they don't check in on the days that they're hybrid, it counts as them being absent. And then those start to add up very quickly. Luke.
On that, I've heard through the grapevine that parents aren't being notified though on those kind of absences.
Well, they are, but they're being notified late. And
Well, I was told that I guess one of them called in, they said that they were all unchecked in the system, that they would not be notified.
right now they are. What happens is the teacher has to go in the next day and check everything because they're working that day. So a lot of times what happens is if you're out on a Tuesday, let's do your hybrid, you come in on Wednesday and the teachers during their prep and planning are then updating the Tuesday attendance. So then everything gets pushed back a day.
Right, but I'm talking about the notification to the parents of the kids being.
Right now they have it checked off
Right.
because otherwise it would
Then
be.
why are we sending letters and holding them accountable if they're not being notified?
What's that? I'll check into it, but I mean, at the end of the day, as far as attendance goes, we'll look into that, but I'll look into if it's checked or not checked. I mean, really, that would really be 7 through 12, I believe.
And I'm speaking more upon like the fines and truancy I mean, I believe the kids need to be held accountable to attend that, yes, but as far as the parents aren't aware that the kids aren't doing it because of notifications, if they're turned off, then that's a problem.
Gotcha. So I'll look into the notifications and I'll let the board know what we find.
Can I be the devil's advocate here? And I think we gotta look at to some of the kids' mental health well-being with being home with this arrangement. I feel that some kids are just not doing well overall with their mental health, with this and not having the interaction and struggling with the schoolwork and the online and.
Yep.
And if I can just build on that before you answer her. I know that we had discussed previously that if there's a 501 or IEP or,
Yep.
any of that in place for students, that we can look at them coming full-time, but with the numbers that we're showing, with what we're looking at, potential return and that kind of stuff, perhaps that is something that we need to address as part of the survey is, and I don't know how to make it happen. This is just spitballing, but there's got to be, we know that there are kids that are thriving and doing just fine. But there's also that group that don't quite fall into the category where they're already receiving help, but aren't doing as well either mentally or intellectually simply because of that. But they sort of fall, I hate to see anyone fall through the gap.
Yeah, well, and that's the challenge we have right now. Legally, we have to offer all our students with IEPs that opportunity to come face to face. Many students have opted in, and just as many have said, no, I'm not doing that. And what we're finding though is those, especially with the IEP students that are saying, hey, I'm not going to do this, they're struggling. They really do need to be here every day. But I think all our students need to be here every day. But that's, we're looking into it. So
I'll also add that the principals and the counselors are working and the teachers are working tirelessly to make those connections home. That, more than ever because of your concern. I think that definitely is a shared concern. And it takes a lot of time to stay on top of that. And we're seeing that as a challenge, for sure. Definitely not trying to diminish the concern whatsoever, but I do know that the counselors, teachers, and principals are on it, much more than I think than they would need to be if the children were all here face to face, for sure.
So based upon the data and some of the things that we've shared, what we're going to suggest or try to do with the board's blessing is to begin trying to look at that planning process and see if we can safely bring back students in grades 4 through 6 for face-to-face instruction. We don't know what that looks like, if it's all 4th and 6th at once, if we phase a grade in, phase another grade in. Part of that is we need to sit down with Dr. Armacost, we need to sit down with the teachers union, we need to sit down with, and just start planning it with Mrs. Biken for transportation. We need to sit down with Mrs. Sprankle for lunches to make sure that, we can intake, because right now, we have 450 students a day in there. And to increase it to 900 a day, well, it's a normal day, it's not a normal day right now. And so that's the first step we would look at. So, when I talked to Dr. Armacost about this, he said, I got a plan, I can have him in here by November 1st. I said, slow down.
What about, I know with CVIS, I know one of the concerns is the teachers having to monitor lunches, that kind of stuff. With that big expanse of lobby area outside the gymnasium and the cafeteria, would that be usable space?
Well, we'd have to look at, but again, that's something Dr. Armacost he's going to know better, his building, how it runs and what it functions. I know talking to Dr. Mueller, the CVA president, she's willing to sit down and look at and see how we can be creative with lunches and recess time and everything else to make sure that, but our goal would be to, I think if anything, potentially look at a potential return right after Thanksgiving. If we can make that happen, that still gives us time to plan everything out. And in that planning process, if we say, wow, we can get this done quicker, maybe look to have them join, sooner. But I think that would be the first step. Like I said, my goal is to get something out to the parents this week to gain their feedback on that also at all levels, 7 through 12, but really focus on the 4 through 6 level. knowing that that's the one we're playing at. Because the reality is, we could say, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, but if the parents are like, no way, we can't bring kids back yet, I don't wanna do something that ultimately may just pull even more kids out of our system because they don't want them there. Now, the one thing that will, if we go full on face-to-face instruction, at 4 through 6, we will get rid of that hybrid model. It will not be an option.
Right.
Every other day, because reality is our teachers will be teaching
It'll
every
be all
day.
or nothing.
And they're already, we hear them loud and clear, the hybrid wasn't as, it's a lot to do. It's a lot of planning to do and preparation to do to get lessons and activities ready for that hybrid learning day. And then on top of it, you're doing it again, and then you're grading, and then attendance. There's a lot going on. So if it would either, it would be full on or, CBOA, which then begs the question, if we take back a lot of kids and they leave the CBOA, does that open spots for other potential people, that might not be happy with Lincoln Edge? And that is a possibility that could happen also, that we can take on other students to be full online if we lose quite a bit to come back because they want to be face-to-face. So there's a lot of options in there that we'll take into consideration. My goal, though, will be to take this data from this week, take the data from the parents also. And what I'd like to do is in November, most likely, I guess, November 2nd, I think it is. Yeah,
I think that's
November
a Monday.
2nd, present some type of plan on what a return to school would look like to the board and to the community. So,
Dr. Rita,
yes.
is there any data as far as case rates for those schools that are face-to-face?
I'm going to look into that because really right now when I look at who's face-to-face, it's Spring Grove, Central York, Dallastown are the big three that stick out to me and that are probably the closest to us. Southwestern, I think, is
They're looking into
it,
yeah.
but those are the big three. So I can reach out to their superintendents to see what's going on. I know obviously you see in the paper, you hear things like obviously the football team for Spring Grove, the freshman football team, all had to quarantine for 14 days because of a potential case or two. But again, you don't know how many were confirmed versus they just, that contact tracing. I know in the paper at one point I saw Dallastown had 6 to 8 confirmed cases. But again, when you look at a school with 6,000 students, that number's small. I'm sure Central York has had some also. But, I'll reach out to their superintendents and just ask, how many confirmed cases and what do you look, what's your biggest distractor when you have those people on full time?
Okay. Yeah, it's just looking to see if there's a significant data difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do like the idea that maybe you could bring a grade back like every 2 weeks till you have CVIS in place. And at the end of that, by the time you bring the 6th graders in, if they feel comfortable, then maybe move on. But if not, if something does happen, at least you can pull back and say, okay, the rest is going to stay the way it is. And we don't have to have a plan for them. And we're not fighting parents,
Sure.
the union, everything like that. But if we see a transition that's really acting normal or getting us back to somewhat normal,
Yep.
and it works, maybe we can flow into the rest of it, and it wouldn't be such a fight where we bring everybody in. All of a sudden, we have a confirmed 2 or 3 cases, and they say, "Oh, look what you did," and we
Well,
back up. So
And the fear is, and I think, maybe even to Jeff's point, now that we can't ensure the 6 feet of social distancing, so we'll have to add into the health plan to the, maximum,
Fingers.
all that terminology. How quick, right now the state's been even with the cases that we had, the state said, look, you're good to go. You've got a plan in place. These kids are distanced. They haven't been in contact for more than 15 minutes. Go in there, deep clean the room. It's ready to go the next day. And that's what, that's my message to parents when I said that, we're not closing down. We've had several other we have one other local school district right now that every building except one has been closed down for a different reason. While they're all COVID-related cases, the Department of Health hasn't necessarily shut them down. Part of the challenge, though, is it may be a staff member or maybe someone else, and with that many people out, it's tough to get substitute teachers right now. We have a daily fill rate of about 65 to 70%, which puts us in a bind at all times, trying to cover classrooms too. But definitely something to think about for sure.
So just one more thing
yes.
on that, and I'm kind of turning it on its heels. The one thing that I've heard from multiple locations, one teacher, couple parents, and aide, is what is stopping us from broadcasting basically our entire school day. And I think we had talked about this when we talked about the hybrid schedule, but I don't remember what the response was there.
Well, having the equipment, that's
Right.
one. But we do have live stream equipment, and the district's goal was to purchase one for every teacher. We got enough right now for all the CBOA teachers, and now we're ordering for the rest of the teachers that aren't doing CBOA. And you can certainly do a live stream. There's some legal stuff that goes with that.
Right, because the students in the
Because of the
classroom, that
students
kind
and
of
the
stuff.
classroom and being recorded or broadcast. So we had to look into some of that, and if we got down to that case and we were ready to do that, that would be obviously go through stock and leader, our attorneys first, to make sure that we were doing everything legally so that we would be out of compliance with any type of FERPA and privacy issues.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about those kids that are kind of, in that gap area where they don't quite need to be here, but they're losing something in transition. That was one of the suggestions that I offered
Yes.
to, I could bring it back, the best we could do.
I would bet it would be a very big percentage of kids that aren't doing as well as what they would do if they had full class.
Yeah,
I don't think it would just be a few. I think it would be a huge, huge percentage.
yeah, and we have students struggling. I mean, I can speak from an athletic standpoint. The amount of students, when we run our progress reports to make sure they're academically eligible, quite a few. I mean, there's a stack where normally we have a thin amount, we have a stack. Now, I will say our high school students have been doing a wonderful job staying eligible. It's our middle school students that are struggling a bit, and I get it. It's the age also. I want to be independent, but I'm not really ready to be independent. I'm living with one right now in my house. I love them to death. I keep telling myself that, but it's.
Want to hug them really tight?
Yeah. So I mean, I get that, and obviously I know from our 4 through 6, talking to the teachers, the kids, our 4th graders, that's a struggle for some.
Right,
Absolutely. And so, I'm glad to see that, at least from a 4 through 6 perspective, there was a resounding, let's get our kids back in here. And we'll see what the parents have to say. But, if the survey comes back positive, like I said, we'll look to push forward with some type of 4 through 6 return. That could be, to your point, Mr. Goff, some type of phased in process where we bring in 4th grade first and then 5th grade and then 6th grade, with the goal of having them all here before Christmas break, just so we can see how the school reacts when everyone's in. Because that gives us a great gauge then when we come back in January to even start looking at, all right, what would a potential 7, 8, or even 9, 12 return look like? But like I said, those all present different challenges. 7 through 12 tends to be more of an independence with students walking around, kind of, doing their thing, where even 4 through 6 is still elementary and still that controlled environment. So it's definitely a difference, not in the classroom per se, but just those transition times are much different. You can walk in a 4 through 6 building, in our intermediate building, and you still see the teachers walking the students to their next class or their next section. You don't see that 7 through 12. But rightfully so, they're young adults and they're starting to learn their own way. So definitely something to think about. It presents a whole new set of issues and problems to diagnose. Any other questions on the survey or anything else at this point?
No, it's just one more door that you open that's gonna take a lot of work to
Yep.
hold it open.
Yes. We'll do what we can for that, that's for sure. So
All right,
with that being said, I'm going to stop the live stream and we'll go into executive session to talk personnel.